So welcome to my talk, Encrypting Buckets for Compliance and Ransom. First off, a few words about me. I've been presenting in different conferences like Black Hat, sector including DEF CON, several B-sides, SANS, and, well, Wild West Hackfest. I'm the author of 4 tools, Nebula, which is a cloud penetration testing framework offering modules in AWS, Azure, and some DigitalOcean. Yeti Hunter, a tool that will enable you to detect attacks happening on your Snowflake environments. Detention Dodger, which will allow you to find which attacks an attacker can do with a set of leaked credentials, which I will also be presenting tomorrow about. And Ransomware, a tool that is literally released today, which will help you to detect ransomwaring on AWS S3 buckets. Let's play a game. So, we will be attackers and defenders at the same time. So we will be the people that will be targeting the cloud environment, and we'll also be the people who will be defending. And we will look at this cat and mouse game of how an attacker will ransom and a defender will try to prevent it undetected. So, you know, it's like a Schrödinger's cat, but with more money involved. The TAs are financially motivated. They are not nation supported. They have relatively low budget, you know, like some laptops and that's all. And ransomware is a goal to them because they can get money easily with very little effort and, you know, not needing to sell the data and everything. As defenders, we are financially motivated because we get paid. We are not nation supported. We have a relatively low budget. You know, I'm supposing that we are a company which uses AWS-related security systems, so stuff like GuardDuty or stuff like even CloudTrail. You know, they log the logs in CloudTrail, but they don't have anything else to forward the logs to. So we have a company which utilizes the cloud provider well, but nothing more than that. And our data is important because we are supposed to be a company that utilizes everything that the data is supposed to offer. Now, in a normal ransomware, we as an attacker will get enough access. We will download the data, encrypt the data, upload them back again, and then ask for the ransom. If they don't pay, we can either leak the data, we can sell them. If they pay, usually the same will happen, but, you know, at least we got more money. And yeah, you know, that's kind of the way a ransomware works. What about an S3 bucket? The S3 bucket works literally the same. S3 bucket is quite literally just an HTTP-based cloud storage. So again, we can get enough access to download the data and upload the data. We encrypt them. We store them somewhere locally, and then we ask for the ransom. Now, we end up with 2 issues with that. First off, as I said, our attackers, or us as attackers, do have a very limited budget. So we don't have enough money to handle terabytes of data with the idea that probably we will get paid. And secondly, we need to find a way to, you know, bypass the monitoring on the target. So how about we use KMS encryption? KMS is basically what I would consider an encryption as a service. It's just an API where you send a data, you get it encrypted, and then you get, you know, the cipher for it. Or you can just have it stored somewhere else in, let's say, an S3 bucket. You have the file, and it's going to be encrypted, uploaded as an encrypted file there. Now, before we start with everything, I should start by mentioning that Spencer Gitson, and I really hope I'm spelling the name correctly, is, to my knowledge, the first public researcher that talked about this this kind of attack. We should, you know, start by mentioning him because, you know, that's the first step. We try to extend upon this research and also gather other researches that are being done by other researchers online and try to find ways on how this can be effective or how this can be prevented. With that being said, almost every resource, too many at least resources in AWS have what it's called a resource-based policy. A resource-based policy differs from an IAM policy because it will limit access of the identity directly to the resource. So you might have an IAM policy which says, okay, you can list all the keys, but if one of the keys will not be allowing you to, or describe all the keys, if one of the keys will not allow you that, you will not be able to describe that key. So it's another layer on top of the IAM policy, which, as I said, enables you to limit access on specific resources that you want to limit the access to. Now, the S3 buckets allow encryption using the encryption configuration, which means you can associate a KMS key with an S3 bucket, and then every data, as long as the requester has access to the key, will be uploaded encrypted. This is good because right now all the data that will be uploaded will be encrypted, and there will be an extra layer of security. Now, KMS policy is harsh. So it's so harsh that you quite literally are not, so KMS doesn't even allow the root account to get access on the key if you do not specify it on the resource policy. In a case like this, we have only the test user being allowed to execute everything on KMS for this key. And if you go and access it with any other identity, you will not be able to not even describe it. You won't be able to describe it, you won't be able to see the policy or change the policy. How does that work? Well, you can either create a key or modify the policy of an existing key. You can encrypt the data on the S3 bucket. So literally, you can just go associate the key with the bucket. Then you can go and tell the just go and re-upload every file with the key. So re-upload them and re-encrypt everything. And right now, all the data are locked out to everybody except for test user. This will be a great way for the attackers to actually log the data. Sorry about this one. This will be a great way for the attackers to log the data because right now, the only identity that will have access to it will be test user, which in our case will be the compromised identity that the attacker has on the target account. And there are other ways on how you can do that, and Spencer gave, he gave, if I'm not wrong, the second one. I also figured out the first one. As we will see later on, KMS is a cross-account resource, meaning you can have a key on one account and use it on another account, or you can have an identity on one account accessing the key on the target account. So you can have your own attacker account with the identity, and then you can give access to the key only to that identity. Another thing is you can even limit by source IP. You can say you have an AWS EC2, so a server somewhere, you can have an IP allocated to you, and you can say any requests that are not coming from this source IP, do not allow them. So right now you have again locked down the policy for everybody. And of course you can do both. You can just allow one, which is the attacker identity, from specific IPs, and right now you have locked everything up on that key, which is inside the target's account. And this is what makes it funnier. You are locking down the resources on the target's account itself. Now, we end up with another bottleneck. First off, if we do not consider the fact that the attacker is using an identity which is on their own attacker's account, and if they only give access to the compromised identity on the target account, well, that identity is part of the account. So what you can do is you can get all the identities, and then you can either create a set of keys for them, or just assume if it's a role, and then just try describe key, or just try something else, an enumeration-related event. The identity that will have an access allowed, so no access denied, will be listed and say, yes, this identity has access. So since the keys inside the target's account, the identity will be in the target's account too. So you will not be able to actually lock out everything. Secondly, you have the CloudTrail logs. Now, you might be saying that the attacker can stop the logs. Yes, but as we will see later on, there is something called the event history, which will prevent the attackers from stopping logs for 90 days. And the target can just go and say who has access to the policy right in the logs. And then say, okay, this identity on my own account has access. Now I can go get access as this identity off my own account and unlock the key. And the last part is, well, there is something else that needs to be considered. The key is on your own target. The key is on your own account, which means worst case scenario, even if the key is locked, you can always just call AWS and they will be happy to just unlock the key for you, which makes this not necessarily at this point the best attack scenario that the attackers would choose. What if they try something new? So let's presume that the attackers will stop CloudTrail logs from being forwarded to the S3 bucket. So for those of you that don't know, the logs will be stored on an S3 bucket, which is part of the CloudTrail CloudTrail trail. You can stop the logging there using something called CloudTrail stop log. Then you can create an identity which you will give access to this key. And you will give access using an IAM policy, and you can give access to using the resource policy. And in the end, after you did the ransomware, you can just delete the user. Right now, the target will not be able to just brute force because the user does not exist anymore. And they will not be able to look at the logs because the logs are not forwarded anymore, which makes it a really good way because right now the target will not be able to practically get access back on the key. Or not. One, there is something, as I said, called event history. Event history is a feature of CloudTrail, which will keep, no matter if you have or not a CloudTrail bucket where the logs are being forwarded, the logs will be kept there for 90 days, which means right now, the target can just go on the event history and try to find out which event either created or updated this key, and then get the username that was prior, created by the attacker, which supposedly has access on the key policy. And the second thing that I found out, and I even submitted a bug to the AWS VDP, turns out AWS manages access on the key policies based on the user ID, not the username. Meaning, if you have a username called Bleon, you give it access to the key, you delete the user, you recreate the username Bleon, that user will not have any more access. So right now, what you did is literally locked yourself out of everything related to the key. So again, this is not something that the attackers would want because you quite literally have just even locked yourself out of the data that you wanted to later on use as leverage for against the target. So yeah, in the end, as we stated before, this is not a good way. It's a way to actually ransomware, but again, the target can always look at the event history. The target can always just brute force or even ask AWS to unlock the key. They will always be able to get the data because the key is inside their own target's account. Which means, what if we have an attacker account, we create the key on our attacker account, and then we do all the encryption using that key. Right now, our target doesn't have access to our account. Why would they have that? AWS will not be able to do much because it's on another account. And we can always just give them access. We can always give the compromised identity access to our key, do everything, close the bucket policy. And then when we want to return the data back, we can always just re-give them access to the key policy, and then they can just go and grab the data that was previously encrypted. Now, there are two ways to do this. There is the policy, so you can literally just put, as we did earlier, you can literally put the other identity to have access on your attacker's KMS key, or you can do what is called a granting. Granting is literally sort of a token-based KMS key access, if I can put it like that. So you create a grant, you allow access to a certain identity as long as they have that specific token. They can go and do everything they want, and you can always just revoke that. Same thing, same logic. On one side you just revoke the grant. On the other hand, you just change the key policy. You have logged the data now as an attacker with your own attacker account. And this also works for object specific. So another thing that AWS allows is that every object can be encrypted separately with a specific key. So you might you might choose to not put the configuration on the bucket, but you can choose to encrypt each key specifically with the same each object specifically with that attacker key. And right now you did the same thing. Again, if the target doesn't have access to the key, you have logged the data for them. Now, as we will see, and yeah, this is the policy that you can do. You can just allow the attacker's account to access the key, and then you can allow the compromised user, and both of them will have access. One thing that I need to point out, one of the reasons why I believe this is not confirmed, but why I believe that the root is not allowed to access the KMS key on the, in the case of a key lock, is because when it comes to principal related or when it comes to policy related, root is usually associated with the account. So if you say account and then root, you are usually saying allow this account access to do that, and this is documented on the AWS documentation too, which means if you said allow root, you are allowing everybody on that account access as long as they have an IAM policy to access the key. So that's what we're doing here. We're allowing everybody on our own attacker account to access the key, and we're also allowing the compromised user just to do the encryption process. And how do we prevent this? Well, there is something called SCP. I forgot the name. The service control policy. Thank you. Totally forgot that. Which is an organization-based policy which prevents a specific event based on a specific condition that you put. So in this case, what you do is you quite literally can say, deny everything related to a resource which is outside of my organization. Now, as long as it's in your organization, you can always get access to. But the attacker is evidently not in your own organization. So what will happen in this case is that even though the attacker will have access to their own attacker key and they will have access to the S3 bucket, they will still not be able to do this because the attacker account is outside of the organization. So with this is a good way to prevent, or one of the ways to prevent this sort of attack. Unless the attacker kind of becomes crafted. If we look at it, if you look at a ransomware process back again, what we do is we download the data, encrypt them locally, and then put them back. And we keep the local version, the unencrypted version locally. What if we do something else? We download the data locally, we encrypt it with our own, that can be a KMS key, or that can be even a local key, a key on the attacker's account, and then we upload the cipher blob back to the S3 bucket. In this case, the target will be able to access the data, but the data they will be able to access is literally just the encrypted blob of the specific previous data that they had. And later on, when they want to, when the attacker gets paid and they want to retrieve the data back, what the attacker can do is just regive access to the attacker-controlled key, and then they can just go and do KMS decrypt for each of the files, and they will have the plain text of the cipher blob that they currently now have on the S3 bucket. So doing it this way will allow them to bypass the organization, the SCP, because every event is currently being done locally on their own machine outside of the AWS IP space. And just to explain it easier, the target will be the target compromised identity, and the attacker will be the attacker compromised identity. So you have two credentials. The target will only download and upload the data which are in the target's organization, and the attacker will just run encrypt, and that's about it. So it's going to be target download, attacker encrypt, target upload. That's going to be the whole flow. This will break the SCP control, because right now the target will not be will have no need to access any attacker-related resources, unless they have versioning enabled. Versioning is a feature of AWS S3 buckets, which keeps a previous version of a certain file on the bucket if it's being modified or deleted. And I tried it once with, if I'm not wrong, 60,000 copies. All of them were kept as long as you are willing to pay for them. So I don't believe there's a limit to it. That means that if the target had versioning enabled on their buckets prior, it doesn't matter what technique the attacker will use, you will still have the previous version of the object, which is the decrypted version of the object, and that way you can literally download all the files. And if you go to a step further, you can even put MFA delete, which will prevent deletion or modification of a data unless you put an MFA key on the event that will delete or modify the data for the S3 bucket. So in this case, I would say, whatever the threat actor did, I could say, there isn't much the attacker can do. After this, we are able, we managed to beat ourselves in our game. We managed to beat the attacker, unless the attacker manages to bypass the versioning prior to doing all the encryption. There are two ways to bypass versioning. First off, you disable versioning. After you disable versioning, all the previous versions will be left there, but you can delete them if you are able to get the version ID of each, and you can do that by just saying list objects, and then you get the list of the deleted objects, which will have a version ID. If you delete every previous version of every file before, the bucket now will be empty, even on the versioning side. And then you can just go and upload the encrypted version. And by doing it, the only version of the file in the bucket is the encrypted one, which the attacker will have access to, which the attacker will have access to the key. The second way, which I like more, is you literally go do that, but do it manually. You list all the objects, you delete everything prior, every other version prior, and even if versioning is enabled, versioning doesn't work for previous versions of a file, meaning if you go and delete the previous versions, no matter if the file is, is versioned before, no matter if a backup is being created, you now have an empty bucket with versioning enabled, you upload the file, no previous version will be left anymore. So you quite literally did what you did before, but you did it manually this time by deleting every previous versions before, and then just uploading the encrypted version. It doesn't matter if the target will have versioning or whatever in their own bucket, unless they have MFA delete, which will not allow us to delete the versions. We literally just left them with one single version, which is the encrypted version on their own bucket. And there should be another slide here, sorry. And as far as MFA delete goes, I didn't go through how MFA delete can be bypassed. You can always just disable it, but this will require you an MFA key. You can always get it by phishing, but to my knowledge, there isn't currently any other way of stopping the MFA delete on the bucket. Now, one other way on how you can do this is using external key store. Now, using the external key store, the whole scenario becomes sort of the way we did it prior. Or there are technically two ways to do this. Harsh, and sorry if I'm pronouncing the name, wrongly. So it's Varagia. Sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. And Chris Ferris both wrote blogs for this. the way you do it is you have your own keys stored on an external key store, and then you connect that to the KMS, and then do everything from the KMS with your own keys. Right now, the attacker controls the physical keys. Even if the AWS will try to do something with it, the target will not have a physical copy of the KMS key, which will actually break you out of the, they will literally have nothing else to do because they don't have the physical encryption key to decrypt the file, and they can change the policy all they want. They won't be able to do anything with it. And the attack can work kind of the same way the previous attack worked, where you can either choose to associate this external key store to the target's account, do the encryption, and then just leave, or you can have it on your own attacker's account, do the encryption, and then you just, you disconnect everything. Same logic happens as previously. You have encrypted everything using a key that only the attacker controls. This is the logic. Now, one way to prevent this is to just use SCPs again. If you are able to prevent another attacker from being able to either associate something or even associate a key store that is not inside the organization, the target's organization, you will be able to prevent this attack from being happening. Unless the attacker, as we said prior, uses this kind of the same way that we used the KMS key before. You can have the external key stored on their own attacker's account, and then they can encrypt everything using the key on the external key store, which at this point kind of becomes redundant because you have the key, you have the physical key. You literally don't need to go this far to do it, but the possibility still stands. So this is kind of you going through a longer route for literally no reason, because you are literally creating an encryption key store and an encryption infrastructure to encrypt files locally when you can literally just have the key and then encrypt them locally directly. But as I said, we are trying to put as much techniques as we can here. So this is another way on how the attack can happen. Lastly, when I was working through the whole policy-based KMS resource policy, I figured out something. When you lock a key, you are preventing every other identity, and as I said, including the root, from accessing that key. Now, in the cases where you want to stop logs from being forwarded to the S3 bucket, and again, this will not affect the event history, and what you can do is you can go and execute CloudTrail stop logging. What if you do something else? If the CloudTrail has an KMS key associated with it, and you can have organizations which have keys associated so their logs will be encrypted. What if you modify the policy of the CloudTrail KMS key? That way, CloudTrail, the service itself, will not be allowed to access the bucket anymore and not be allowed to access the KMS key anymore. So no logs will be allowed to be forwarded to the S3 bucket, to the CloudTrail S3 bucket, for as long as you allow for as long as you don't change the policy. Now, how can this be prevented? The target can literally just change this by using update trail. They can literally remove the key, and every new log will continue to be uploaded there. But what you can do is you can go and temporarily, if they don't have any sort of SNS alerting for logs being stopped, you can temporarily just change the KMS policy or just attach a KMS policy to the CloudTrail, and no logs will be forwarded. You can continue with everything you want and hope that they will not be seeing the event history. After 90 days, if they don't see through the event history, those logs will be deleted from the event history. Now, the target has no clue or has no evidence that this attack actually happened on AWS. And as I said, you can do this as much as you want. And if you want to, now this is something that will require a lot more work because it requires too much permissions. If you manage to get access to the CloudTrail S3 bucket, which congrats, because very few identities will have access to that. Another thing you can do is you can go and encrypt individual events or individual events being uploaded on the bucket, and then you can literally hide yourself from the target by literally removing them. And if those events, again, are outside of the 90-day scope, you have removed all evidence if they do not have any other place where they store the logs, like a SIM or some sort of a backup. So again, this is one way to actually utilize the encryption of KMS, encryption using KMS to literally create something else. In our case, we are literally simulating CloudTrail stop logging. Now, all of this ended up in a tool which was released today called Ransomware. Ransomware is a tool which has two functionalities. One is to enumerate all the identities which are able to execute commands based on a list of scenarios which we have provided, which are again configurable. And secondly, we look through all the events for again a second list of events and see whoever did those events so that you will be able to easily find out if an attack like this happened. Currently, it only supports the CloudTrail API. I didn't have time to work with the CloudTrail S3 bucket. This is a work in progress, but so far, it's able to do that for the 90 days period that the CloudTrail API will, the event history will have the logs. And the way it does, so when you run identities with just a profile, it's going to list everything on your own account, on the requesting account, and then go through every scenario and then say, okay, does this identity have access to execute those privileges? The way it does it is by getting all the policies that the identity can have on them, attached policies or inline policies, or for users even policies of their own groups, and then executing a simulate custom policy, which will look through all of them and say, okay, this identity is allowed to execute these specific tasks. And if at least one of them is not allowed, so if at least one is allowed and at least one is not allowed, it will say it's partially allowed, which will allow you to kind of get a grasp of which identity you have and what access do they have. As far as the events goes, okay, and yeah, these are the scenarios that it will look by default. All of them will be stored in a JSON file on the scenarios folder, which will have this format. And again, as I said, you can always just modify the JSON. You can add or you can remove or you can modify privileges. It will still be able to dynamically search for them. As far as the event goes, it will go through the CloudTrail event history and then just try to find every event related to the KMS ransomware. And the events that it will be testing are the events listed here. Some of them are not necessarily related to the KMS itself or S3 itself, but are events that you will need to use, like create the user or create the role and give them, give them permissions, which will be beneficial on the scenario where we are creating an identity and then deleting it at the end. And each event will have this format where you can put your own information and it will search for everything on every field so that you might be able to filter them more. Let's say you want to check for a specific user agent that you are suspecting, you can do that. Identity, etc. Those are all the fields. And again, you can modify or you can add or remove anyone you want. And as I said, I have some plans for it. I want to merge the CloudTrail API with the CloudTrail storages being forwarded. I also want to do a separate part where after it gets the events, it tries to group them by resource to sort of figure out if there's an actual attack happening, except for, instead of just listing every event and that's it. And probably a cross-account enumeration where you can put different identities and it will just sort through all of them, or even in the case of an organization, it will be able to actually look through every member account inside that organization. And all of this, again, led to the release of 2 blogs. One is on my personal blog, and the second one is on the Permissos blog. You can always just access them from here. And yes, we end up in the end. So our conclusion, so what can I just conclude with all of that? First off, beware of the accesses you give and whoever you give access to the KMS keys. And of course, beware of not locking yourself out of KMS in case you end up accidentally doing it. Always enable bucket versioning, and if possible, if kind of the whole situation allows you, enable MFA delete, especially if it's something that will be static or changed very, changed very few times. And please use SCP to prevent against the usage of external accounts, attacker's account, or even external key store, if you are not using them on your own infrastructure, of course. Here are some references to what I've done, including, blogs and stuff that I helped me find everything, and that's it. Any questions?
You talked about the external key store.
Yes.
Which was amazing when that article came out. I haven't seen anybody talking about combining that with the server-side encryption APIs with S3, which seems like it would be significantly faster if you used a SSEC with the external key store.
Okay, I haven't tried that too.
We could talk, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I should look at that, sorry. I haven't tried, so, thank you for the idea. I should test and actually know if I think it's possible and, how well it can operate. Sorry, I should test. I can't say anything for certain. Yeah.
Have you locked yourself out of the lab yet by accident?
Sorry?
Have you locked yourself out of the lab yet by accident? Ransomware in your own lab?
If you open my lab, there are about 25 keys there, which I have, some of them related to the delete user. And to be honest, I haven't, contacted AWS, but yeah, so one thing that you will see, let me just show you this. If you go to this one here. So if you can see that red error there, the moment your identity does not have access to a specific key, you will have one of these errors. And if there are a lot of them, you will have if you go to the KMS of my own lab, you will have because there are a lot of them. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Hello.
Hello.
So I think I need to preface my question by first stating that I know an embarrassingly little amount about AWS, so I'm a little blown away with all of the information. So with that, as a defender, I'm wondering what would be the best use of my time to mitigate the risk of this happening as much as possible. And I noticed your conclusion slide that had a couple points on it, but what can I do? What's the best use of my time to have the biggest impact to mitigate this risk?
There are different ways on how you can manage this. And of course, based on your own infrastructure, because based on how you architect everything. But if I could say the easiest thing is first off, try to understand who will have access to the keys, and then try to limit anybody else from having access to them. Secondly, check out what you are using, and especially in the case of external key store, even if I'm not wrong, both writers, but I know that one of them, I'm pretty sure one of them does specify this. If you're not using external key store, just limit them. Limit the usage of them using SCPs, because if you're not using them, why the hell are you leaving? And you are actually leaving one attack path open. And the third one will be, I have an architecture in mind, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people might not like, and even myself, I do not like it. You can make use of the fact that KMS are a cross-account resource, and you can use something something equivalent to the Active Directory Red Forest. And if there's any sysadmins here, sorry, because I know they don't like it, but you can have an account, manage all the keys, and then you can use those keys on other accounts. Then you can lock that one account, not everything else, so that it's going to be a lot easier for you to now go and manage everything that's happening. And you can even go and create an SCP that says, limit every KMS request not going to that account. I'm pretty sure you can do that. This is at the top of my head, so I'm pretty sure you can do that. And by having it that way, you are managing all the permissions on there, and it's a lot easier for you to now manage one thing than to manage many stuff. And then you can, as I said, put everything that you want on this account, and then whatever happens around, they will not be able to do anything, on any other account. The attacker will go on any of the S3, accounts that has the S3 bucket. Who cares? They will need to go and get access to one of the identities that has access there. And then, of course, you can go and limit it even more if you want to.